People cannot possibly plan for every contingency. They can't.
Well, I watched the original video many years ago about the story about CO2, which was a propaganda deal from Margaret Thatcher during the coal strike.
We might lose the power grid. I mean, who knows? The grand solar minimum with volcanoes, with earthquakes, with solar flares penetrating Earth's magnetic field when it's down. I mean, right now, this is the weakest we've seen it in 200 and some years.
And I did notice a huge difference this summer. Very difficult to grow anything. We planted things over and over and over up here just to try to get something to grow.
I've always kind of been interested in the cycles, and my background of taking botany and horticulture classes basically found out there was larger cycles repeating over smaller cycles, and even larger cycles of ups and downs in climate, dry periods, warm periods, cold periods, wet periods.
I look at details. I was raised in the military. My father was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. He was a pilot. At the end of his career, he was a helicopter rescue pilot in Vietnam before he got shot down. He was always like, Cynthia, it's not enough to have a plan A and a plan B. You better have a plan C, D, E, and F, because if anything has taught me anything, stuff goes all to pieces in seconds, and you better have a backup plan to your backup plan to your backup plan.
I think the most important thing for people to do is to try to build their relationships with the people in their neighborhoods and their community, depending on how big their community is. And they really need to get to know what other people are doing and how they're thinking. Because if anything happens, that's the people that's going to be knocking on your door. And I think the other thing is kind of keep your mouth shut.
Thank you for staying rational and sane, and I'll talk to you again.
I wasn't expecting a lot of callers tonight.
Well, and this is the beginning.
It was so good. It was better than watching the Cleveland Browns.
Wow.
Matt taking shots on the live show.
Please join us for our next call-in show on Patreon. Like our supporter Richard said, no one is as smart as everyone working together.
All right. What's going on, people? It's Friday night here on the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Welcome to the call-in show. For those of you who have joined our platforms here on YouTube as a membership, also a Patreon and our monthly PayPal subscribers, you do have access to the number tonight, so call in. Tonight's topic is going to cover how do we talk to our friends and family about Grand Solar Minimum and what that means to you. And I'll tell you, today I did a podcast with the gentleman, TCK, his podcast, Trad Cat Night. And we had a good talk. But the main part of the discussion today was awareness. And I think both of us took away something from each other after the recording was over with. And the one thing that I feel like that I gained the most out of today is that there are so many people out there who maybe just aren't getting the right information. The host, Eric, great guy. I felt like he was a very fair and balanced host. He had beliefs that might not have went with what we believe here, but he was willing to listen because the things that he believes in as well correlate with some of the events that we discuss here on Grand Solar Minimum. So today was a good example about how to talk to somebody that you don't know, or maybe a friend or a family, about what Grand Solar Minimum is. And I think the approach that I took today was you have to be almost with kid gloves with this. Am I right, Mari? I mean, is it pretty much, you don't want to come at them cocky, arrogance, nothing like that, egotistical. You just want to have a real conversation with the person, whether it's a friend or a family member or whatnot. Now, I think the talk went well today. Like I said, he has beliefs and we have beliefs, and that's okay. But the point I'm trying to make tonight is when you are going to talk to your friends and family, we have to have a rational explanation for folks. We have to be calm. It has to be a delivery that is not overexcited or overdramatic. Mari, would you like to add to what I'm trying to relay tonight as far as, because this is an uphill battle, right? I mean, not everybody, like I had to actually correct Eric about Eric or Mark Morano.
Yeah.
He was confused on what a climate change denier was. And I had to tell him right away, I said, look, Mark's not a climate change denier. He's a man-made climate change denier, like all of us here in this community. And that is, we don't believe in man-made global warming, man-caused climate change. We believe in natural cycles. And that's, I really wanted to clear that up right away, because it's bad that we get that rap that we're climate deniers. We're not climate deniers, none at all. But I mean, would you like to add on, like, how do you think, what was it like? I know it was different for you when you first started getting on board with this and you started talking to your mom about this. Like, how was that conversation in the beginning? Do you think maybe she gave you the crazy eye at first?
It was more a deer in headlights, like, look, because it's...
God bless Nancy.
when you're approaching this topic, it comes at you from many different angles. And then there's also that huge adversity from what most people have been brought up with over the past 30 years, from it's cooling to now it's warming. And a lot of them, I think, especially, what do they call them? The boomers?
Yeah,
I think
baby
they're
boomers.
sort of numb to the topic.
Well, they've heard this before.
Because it's like, yeah, I've heard that, whatever.
30 years ago, they were told the world was going to end.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, I heard that. And then on the other spectrum, I think a lot of the younger people are so indoctrinated into this way of thinking. And everyone in general really wants to do something good for the planet and be, on the right path. But what they're not seeing is this huge scandal, this fraud to gain tax dollars off of green energy that's not really green. And that's just one way you could go with it. And then trying to explain solar cycles and space weather and how that affects our magnetosphere and the jet streams. And it, for most people, if you're not used to talking weather and all that in the more advanced stages, it's overwhelming for a lot of people. How do you explain this easily for people to have it be impactful to their lives, or perhaps their future, or their children's lives? I'd like to welcome Marie Mitchell. She is our latest member on YouTube. Thank you.
Hello, Marie Mitchell. Yeah, that's another thing too, folks. We appreciate the support that we've seen. The memberships are starting to grow. Very, very surprisingly, nicely seeing that we have so many different colored greens out there. It's really neat. I've actually seen a couple of channels that have this feature, and
I think we got 10 YouTube members.
Yeah, more than that. Is
it 12?
About 12 or 13, something like that. But still, I mean, it's small. It's small, but it's a beginning, and it's great to see that we are starting to gain a little traction with this. You guys have been wonderful. Lately, we have done a lot of reporting on current events. We've tried to keep a more constant, steadier schedule. And we appreciate you guys continuing to show up and continue to make us your choice for Grand Solar Minimum news. So once again, thank you. But getting back to topic tonight, how to talk to your family and friends about Grand Solar Minimum. And I guess I'll kind of share a little bit here before we get some callers. I know that there's a lot of things that are going against this topic when you talk about global cooling and not being man-made global warming. You have people who go to college right now, and they are learning in their classrooms as we speak that global warming is caused by man and that we are in a climate emergency. I know this to be a fact because I actually employ a person who attends college, and she sent me a chart and was asking me why her professor was saying that global warming has made an impact on less snowfall falling, and they gave her a years between 1979 and 2010. So they didn't even update the current data. So these people are teaching the students about information that's not even current. So their facts, their database, it starts somewhere where it's more favorable for these people to indoctrinate this message. Cherry picking, basically. But it's hard because you think about it, like this person, she's paying good money to go to college, and you got to imagine she's looking at me like, okay, you're telling me that I'm paying tens of thousands of dollars for this degree, and these people are just lying to me because there's some kind of massive scheme of giant global warming taxation that's robbing the folks and the elite are getting richer. I mean, I get it. And it goes on and on and on and on. So how do you talk to them? Well, again, I think it has to be in an intimate setting. I think it has to be in a place where that person trusts you, a familiar place, and it has to be almost in a casual and natural way. And I will say this, and we do have a caller, we'll take him here just in a second, but I will say this. I think it's really important as a researcher, as a member of this community, that if you're going to try to spread the information about grand solar minimum, I think it's really, really important that we learn some facts and have them memorized. I'm not saying everything. I'm just talking about basic things. So, it helps when you can prove to people that you have dates of when these facts are presented and what the numbers are. Trust me, people will believe, and it's not just even in climate talk. It could be anything in life. You show them.
I mean, you can just start with the weather and then review history. I think probably the toughest thing to describe are the cycles, but sort of correlating what your area went through and understanding the history of it, because this is a regional thing as well.
Yep.
And us being in New York and Jake being raised in Ohio, we're more familiar with this region. Depending on where you are, your history and everything and how something like this could affect you is going to vary. It could be really hot. It could be really cold. It could be really wet. It could be really dry. It's regional. So I think are you pouring your Pepsi right next to the microphone? Yeah,
I just realized we have a decent microphone here. That is the refreshing taste of Diet Pepsi, folks.
Everyone's thirsty for Jesse on the line.
You got the right one, baby.
I
Hello.
hope he's feeling good. Hold on. Did you hit hello?
I didn't, but you can do it.
Let's do it right now.
You can control it from your screen? Good.
I can.
I can see who's calling in.
Voice prompts, and the voice prompts aren't these automated things. It's like Mari saying the automation, which is awesome.
Mari. Look, Doug Ellen says, for the Diet Pepsi. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you, Doug, for being a part. Jesse, what's up, my friend? We haven't heard from you. Well, actually, that's our fault. We haven't had a show, but thanks for calling in. How you doing tonight, bud?
Not too bad. Getting better. You may hear me cough once or twice, but
yeah, I heard you were sick.
You didn't have a call in. I couldn't talk through all the coughing anyways.
Yeah, I actually heard that you had been a little bit under the weather through Mari in the chat. I try to get in the chat when I can if we have a premiere or anything like that. But so good to hear that you're doing a little better as far as that. But tonight our topic is how to talk to your friends and family about grand solar minimum. And I guess what tonight's purpose is to try to just share with the rest of us in the community. Everybody has different ways. Everybody's different. And I guess tonight we want to give the platform to our listeners and just kind of share with us how you first started talking to friends and family about what's going on right now.
Well, thank you. So what I normally do is when people talk about the weather next year is going to be a lot like this. So it's cold, wet, and rainy this whole spring and summer. I'm like, next year's going to be like this. Because we're just at the bottom of an 11-year solar cycle going into a grand cycle. Then I tell them a little bit about that. And then they go, oh, that's really interesting. And I just kind of leave it at that. I don't put anything more on there. And it's just that nice little first entry point. Or like we have the volcanoes erupting in the Philippines. And I said, oh, those things are interesting. And I say, have you ever heard about the year without a summer? And I've used the year without a summer as a nice little entry point or other historic events, or the little ice age. And I talk about other times when it was cold. And I just kind of let history and stories tell that. Shoot, I've even been in church and we're singing a hymn and it's from a certain era. And I'm like, oh, wow, they had a really tough time with everything going on at that time. You can kind of see that in the hymn of what they were singing about. Just picture the weather they were going through, or the political things in the country they're in. So that it's kind of like a fun little thing of taking what's happening in history or just the day-to-day weather and bringing it back into this grander cycle.
I know a lot of folks hear a lot about the fossil fuel industry being the cause of, the climate change, that we're accelerating temperature rise, and that CO2 emissions are causing this. And if we cut them back, then we can change the flow of the climate and everything will be okay. And I here's the thing. The way they campaign this global warming, man-made climate change is that they make you feel compassionate about saving the planet. You're doing something good, in other words, by, hey, I reduced my energy bill this year, so I help save save the climate, I save the planet. And everybody feels compassionate and they want to do good for the environment. And that's great. I mean, if you ask me, what we need to concern ourselves with is these other third world countries that will use rivers and lakes and oceans as garbage dumps. That to me is what man's contribution to making the planet sick is, the pollution from the garbage and just mishandled toxic waste that we do have on this planet. That's the man-made part. But when it comes to the climate, and all we've learned and heard on TV for the past 30 years, and Al Gore and his friends, is that the ice caps are melting, the polar bears are dying, climate change, then you get these new young Congress leaders who are like scaring the bejesus out of the millennials right now. And some of them, it doesn't take much to scare them. But when you're being told that there's 12 years left on this planet, and if we don't reverse fossil fuel usage and drop it down to a zero within 12 years or 30 years, then we're going to die. So that, to me, when you have so much going against what we're about in the mainstream, in the government, we're supposed to be able to trust these organizations. And I find it unfortunate that we have to take this out of bounds a little bit to try to help people connect the dots, because otherwise we're all in for it as far as falling for these carbon tax credits and new green policies. Jesse, I had some folks in an area the other day, and they were in the building that we were in as well, doing their sales thing, and they worked for a company that sold solar and wind energy. And the way they were catching the attention of the customers that would pass by would be, hey, do you care about the environment? Hey, would you like to help save the planet? Hey, would you like help the climate? I mean, it was awful, like so misleading, and in my opinion, and me having a sales background, unethical.
I kind of like the approach when the people are bringing up the CO2 and climate change and warming temperatures. I said, oh, I really hope it does, because we're in an interglacial period, and if we can stave off going into the next glaciation, that would be excellent, because it's really hard to make it through a major glaciation period than to go through this warming thing.
Exactly.
And if we can actually keep the environment warmer, it's so much easier to grow food and take care of people in a warmer environment than a cold one. So it's just like, I just plant that nugget of it might actually be better if the earth warmed. And it's like, make them think about what actually a cooling earth might be by saying, you know, it would be easier to live on a warmer earth than to live on a colder earth. And then he can talk about what leads to cooler earths, and that's a nice little lead into that. Because then you can talk about a volcanic eruption, and we got the historic events.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this happened, and we had 30% of the population of Scandinavia die. That would be a little bit tough.
I think, and go ahead. I'm sorry, Jesse.
No. You go right ahead.
We get a little bit of delay, folks, so we apologize on YouTube. There's a slight delay for the callers that use the call-in number here, so we do apologize for that. But no, you're right. You can help relate current events with historic events like Tambora. And I think what's interesting, too, is when you bring up stories like that and history events, it gets people thinking a little bit, especially the ones that I've run into that claim to be teachers. And I think what throws them off a little bit, and I had a conversation with a teacher not too long ago, and she was an older teacher. She taught for a while. But the facts that I kept presenting to her about what's happening right now, and she brought up Venice. Well, you don't think climate change is real? What's going on in Venice? And I'm like, no. I didn't say I didn't believe in climate change. I said that man is not doing this. And when I started talking about how many times Venice actually floods out in that area, it changed her thinking just a little bit. And the next example she would give me, I would also give an example of the normality of that and the numbers. So like I was saying in the beginning, if you're anything like me, I'm a numbers guy. I love numbers. It's important too if you can just retain a few things that can be useful and something that they can relate to. Because honestly, if you can't relate, it's going to be really tough to get through to a group of people that you can't relate to. Mari, yes.
Oh, definitely. And Venice is a really interesting one too, because when you think about Venice, there's an interesting story of all the multiple factors that are leading to the sinking of Venice with the tourism, and actually the Venice subsided by almost a foot to 2 feet because they pumped all the groundwater out from underneath Venice and the surrounding area. Whole area subsided like different farming areas in California as they were pumping out the aquifers. So they actually have plans of pumping seawater underneath Venice to raise and to maybe regain 17, 18 inches that they lost.
Mari, you was going to say something?
I was just going to share what Cheryl said in the chat. She starts off giving people the background story on the famous starving polar bear.
Oh, yeah. Well, and, you know, Mari and I were watching a commercial on Fox News channel one night, and they had a phone number for you to call to donate to the Starving Polar Bear Foundation, and how there's so many. So I called the number and put him on speaker. I wish we recorded that, but
I think I have a partial of that, which I'm going to upload for our members on YouTube and Patreon.
I asked, the first thing I asked the person that answered the call, I asked them if they knew that the polar bear population is actually thriving over 400% than what people are saying. And then, like, you could hear her fumbling around for information. Well, I think, like, some of the species of polar bears are doing bad, and some of the species of polar bears are doing good. And then I said, which species are we talking about? And then, of course, her answer is, well, you probably want to go to the website to get the information that you need. And the sad thing is when I went to the website, there's no facts. There was nothing that supported their claims. It was just a bunch of claims of global warming. Had nothing factual in there about global warming. So again, that's why I just thought, well, we got to do some kind of a show where we're bringing awareness on how to present this topic to people, because so many people, and I hate to use the term brainwash, but it's the truth. So many people are brainwashed into believing that man is actually causing global warming, that CO2 is killing the planet.
Mm-hmm. Articles that get posted on your Facebook group, sharing a select group of them, especially when there are articles that come out from sources like NASA or other climate organizations that basically point to the narrative of sun-driven climate change and deep ocean cycles. I think those are very helpful. Like back in this early spring, there was the article that came out from NASA about going into a grand solar minimum, not as strong as the smaller minimum, basically pointing to the delta minimum and making a great time for manned space travel. I'm like, that's an interesting article. You put that out there, it's like NASA is saying there's going to be lower solar output, and it has an effect on what we can do as people. And an article like that one lays it for that plus a few other ones. I have my wife's uncle, and he said he's an engineer, and he found the stuff that I was posting very interesting, talking about all these different cycles and basically the readings and the predictive future of going into this cooling period. And things with the numbers and the straightforward information, a lot of times for the people that are very analytical, that reaches them. I don't claim to be able to remember all the numbers in that, but just being able to show a few things like that, and then I remember some narratives of history, and I talk about the history and when people emigrated, and it makes for great stories. And if a person hasn't had a chance to read the book, Tambora, The Year Without Summer, 1816, it was the year that changed the world. It was a book that came out like 2014, 2015, but that book about the year without a summer, 1816, Tambora, the eruption that changed the world, that's the title. But that book has such a great narrative of what happened during the volcanic eruption, during the Dalton minimum, that it's very compelling. And there's so many things that tie into deeper parts of history that people go, why was I never taught this? You tell a great story that people have never been taught, and they'll question why they haven't been taught it. I think that's a great intro too.
Mari, did you want to add anything here?
Yeah, one of the intros I use, because a lot of people like throwing the 97% consensus around, is really breaking the reality of what the alleged 97% is. There's many different studies that claim this. One of the most famous ones out of them all is the Cook et al., where he polled it was almost 12,000 people, and 7,900 took no position, and then about 3,900 voted, and 64 of all the votes said they believed in the man-made climate change was the primary reason. And then the other votes were sort of non-biased or not at all, or just indifferent. So it wound up actually being only 1.6 actual scientists believed, and it was only 64 people. So what a vague BS statement for the crazy AGW crowd to be indoctrinating everyone with 97% consensus on these joke scientific research things, which the most recent one last year had Dr. Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck.
Dumbledore was also a signature.
Give me a break. And then not only
I think Alf might have been on there too.
Saying the poll is for just climate scientists, and then looking at some of the professions as just students or nothing marked at all, or mechanics, or just not anything to do with climate. So it's sad, and the proof really is in the history, which is getting sort of scary, because it's like more and more of our research sources, I feel, are all digitized and electronic, and they can, it's easy come, easy go. So historical records, to me, I'm concerned because of just the whole George Orwellian times effect. Who controls the narrative can control the history. Who controls the past controls the future. All 1984 stuff, Jake. Seriously.
Yeah.
I've seen scientific articles that had news write-ups and everything just be wiped off. Like, look at all the articles like on Watchers.news, and that one article that spec'd out all the different research papers on galactic cosmic rays and its effect to the planet. You go to that article and try to click on some of these actual scientific articles, they're like gone. It's sort of freaky.
Well, I'm getting a little freaked out here by the chat here. I gotta be honest with you.
What's going on in
we
the chat?
somehow got into a conversation about nursery rhymes being creepy. And I brought up the Ring Around the Rosie as maybe it's talking about as a volcanic eruption. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down.
Oh, that was Black Death.
Yeah, that's Black. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And then to hear in the pockets, the posies were there to cover the stench. Wow. Well, I mean, I remember talking about this when we were kids. Like this was. I'm totally freaked out about nursery rhymes as well. And thank you, chat. Like my God.
It's just like something innocent. So it sounds so innocent.
It is innocent, but it's very dark.
Then it's dark. It's like when I was singing "You Are My Sunshine" the other day.
She was trying to cheer me up, and then I realized
how horrible
a
song it is. It's
wow.
like, why did I do that to him? Just traumatize you.
Drink some bleach
I'm
now.
sorry.
Depressing. Well, it's like the old jump rope one. Didn't you guys think Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks.
Oh,
then
boy.
Lizzie Borden was quite bored. Give her father 40 more. Talking about the whole. And, I mean, she was acquitted. She never was charged with anything. I mean, she was charged, but they didn't find her guilty. But it's kind of one of those historical things where the kids sing a nursery rhyme that talks about something just horrific. Because both her mom and dad, or stepmom and dad, were killed by an axe. They don't know if it was her or a random family member or the maid that was in the house. But those things that make national news, and the kids just remember it in a rhyme.
I'm being referred to read Grimm's fairy tales, and I'll have to do that as well. That was suggested more than once. But getting back on topic here to the Grimm. No, as far as the Black Plague, though, and we were talking about that earlier, actually, when we were doing the interview with the podcaster Eric over there at Trad Cat Night podcast, and we were talking. He asked the question: does disease and sickness thrive, basically, during this period of time? And from what we have seen and what we have learned, and we talked to Sasha Dobler several years ago, and what we got from that is that he's not willing to 100% say yes, that every grand solar minimum has a plague, but there are several grand solar minimums that do have a famous disease or an outbreak that also affected population loss. So we have to think, and this is why, it's like we get so many questions on this channel about how come you don't mention geoengineer, and how come you don't mention HARP, and how come you don't mention CERN, because there's so many layers to what can happen during a grand solar minimum. It's insane. Anywhere from natural disasters such as earthquakes, tsunamis, volcano eruptions, And then you have to factor in the climate factor with the snow, the rain, the floods, the avalanches, the mudslides. And then you have to think in the space weather aspect of this, a possibility of a solar flare that could wipe out the grid. I mean, there's so many layers to grand solar minimum. To me, it would almost be impossible to cover properly this topic while mentioning other subjects such as magnetic pole reversal or CERN or other things like that. Guys, there's enough to try to grasp and wrap our heads around that we can actually see and test for ourselves. The other things that keep getting asked and mentioned are just theories at this point. So I'd have to see more empirical data about CERN and HARP and their results and how it's done.
Yeah, a lot of people do ask us why we don't cover that as often. And you know what? I think your answer is great because there really is a lot to the grand solar minimum. There's no reason for us with our channel to look left or right or anything. We have to cover everything that encompasses grand solar minimum when it comes to the directly related stuff. Sure, there's other influences, there's other things people are discussing, but we definitely make a conscious choice not to cover some of it, whether it be on the fact that we have researched the science behind it. And for really the most part is a lot of those subjects are more speculation than fact and wind up being completely toxic when you try to be rational about it and discuss other things
and I mean,
factually.
And no disrespect for the people that follow these topics. It's just that there's enough to talk about with grand solar minimum. And I just gave you 3 examples: space weather, climate, and of course the seismic and volcanic activity, tidal waves. I mean,
there's a lot.
There's so much
within it.
Right when you think you can predict, like, oh, hey, I think it's okay, judging these patterns, it's going to be this, this, and this. Last winter, Joe Bastardi was looking at the Julian-Madden oscillation, and he was looking at the phase 8 of the Madden-Julian oscillation, and he was comparing it to a different time that had the same signatures in the MGO, but it didn't happen the way that Joe thought it was going to happen because there was another complexity that was in place that wasn't there the last time they saw these same patterns. And I think it was a sudden stratospheric warming event that changed why we didn't see the bigger snows that I mean, we got plenty of snow last year, but he had thought that we were going to see some really serious snows in a period of time, and it didn't happen. And again, they didn't factor in these sudden stratospheric warming events because we really didn't start hearing about these things, or I didn't at least, until we started hitting the minimum period. So I don't know if you had anything else.
I'll tell you what. On a personal note, I do appreciate this channel. It's like being very focused on certain aspects of it and not getting into the more woo-woo aspects of GSM or the more high-octane speculation as another YouTuber would talk about those. It makes it a lot more approachable because there's a lot of people, all of a sudden, they hear something and their radar goes up. You know, where it's like, oh, no, they're talking about that. Oh, that's a step back. That's a little bit of a, you know, potential of, you know, what's the word for that? You know, a conspiracy theory.
Right.
I like stepping as far back from conspiracy theory as possible.
That's a blessing and a curse for us too, because I think that also makes us a target because people do see us as credible and reliable, and you know, I think sometimes
non-sensational.
These platforms, they're just like, well, it's just a conspiracy channel. No one's going to believe that anyway. And if you look at our view counts, you guys can tell we've been around since 2016, and it's incredible how restricted this channel is compared to other channels similar age, and it's like, wow. Now they do throw us a bone. Like we have the membership option for YouTube, which is interesting. But
And a lot of channels don't have that yet.
Maybe they're like, because we do try to be vetting our information and doing the best we can to make sure we're not, crossing that line of sensationalism and stuff. I mean, some of the stuff we report is sensational, and it's like, wow. Some of these weather events they're jaw-dropping. Wow. That's sensational. But we don't take things and just skew it or, do anomaly map abuse, that kind of stuff.
And I wish that was seen with everyone else throughout the community, because when you really zoom out and look at the big picture, there's no reason to exaggerate anything. You don't have to exaggerate to the people down there in Mississippi and the backwater floods. You don't have to exaggerate what's happening right now along the Mississippi, because it's getting ready to happen again. That happened last year, but it's going to happen earlier than it did last year. So there's no reason to put this, dramatic spin on, crop failure and this. We know this is serious. And I feel like there's a responsibility about reporting this kind of information, and we have to handle it with some sensitivity as well, because the people that are actually living these headlines, and if you get up here and make light of it or make your jokes or make your commentary to be more entertaining for people to absorb the information, a person that's living that headline is not going to find that funny, is not going to find that reliable or credible, and it gives a bad name to the rest of the group where it doesn't belong. Once you see it from one area, that you think everyone is the same, and unfortunately, it's kind of like the thinking that we're seeing all over the country when it comes to everything from climate to politics, hell, even sports. So, well, listen, Jesse, we have another caller in. That Richard is beeping in on us, so we're going to go ahead and take his call, but we really appreciate you getting the night started with your commentary and your comments as well tonight.
Well, thank you. Wish me luck and say a prayer, because I'm driving home in a blizzard. So.
Oh, that's right. My gosh, please be careful.
Yeah, we'll do. It's going to be a nice, slow 25-mile-per-hour drive.
Yikes.
Almost as fast as the wind.
When you get home, leave a comment.
Yes, so we know you got home safe. Please.
We'll be like mom and dad.
Yeah, we're mom and dad now. You let us know when you get home now, son.
I appreciate it. I know you guys, there's a lot of people thinking about me and praying for me when I was sick, and I really appreciate that. So.
How's your mom doing, Jesse?
She's getting over the pneumonia.
Oh, that's good.
She's still got some hay to sell and all that to cover the expenses that weren't met with the sales before the first of the year. So we'll see how that goes. She sold all the beef.
Oh, good.
She's got a few heifers sold, but found out that we have friends that have had this pneumonia that's going around for a month and a half, and they're on their third antibiotic up around here. So
wow,
we'll see.
Wow, yeah, I know friends back home in Ohio, there's a nasty flu going around out there as well. So it's that time of year, folks. Make sure you take care of yourself and thoroughly wash those hands. But Jesse, once again, thank you for calling in tonight. I'm glad to hear that everything was is doing much better for you as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Have a good night.
You too.
Night.
All right, good to hear
Bye-bye.
Good to hear from Jesse. It's been a while. Like I said, we haven't done a show in a while, so I guess we can't sit here and say it's been a while, because that's our fault, right, Mari?
It has. We had to get through the holidays, and then I was trying to figure out if getting this toll-free number would do the trick, because it's more costly, but I like the idea of having that toll-free option. And
plus, I miss these people.
Okay, we do miss these people, absolutely. Speaking of missing people, I haven't talked to Richard in ages, so let's bring him on.
All right, Richard, thank you for calling. Long time no hear, buddy. How you doing?
Hi, how are you all this evening?
Hey.
Glad to be back on the air.
Yeah. Well, just looking for ways to talk to people. Something to consider is that you're trying to deprogram them. So I had put an article on Stockholm Syndrome on the website a while ago. You might want to dig that up and actually read it. It's pretty interesting what it takes to actually change people's views. And one of the main things is you cannot attack people and think that that's going to change their mind.
Too right. Absolutely. That would just close the door to communication.
Well, I think the recommended method for deprogramming people from Stockholm Syndrome is they're going to have to be comfortable with you. They're going to have some degree of believing that you would tell them the truth. And it's not a quick process. You're not going to do it in one conversation. I mean, you cannot adopt a tactic of attacking what they believe. So if they think that CO2 causes global warming and it's man-made, you need a very subtle approach so that they will learn for themselves what may actually be going on.
Yeah, you're not lying. I remember a couple times just having conversations with folks in a park or maybe in a store, and you get talking about the weather, and the minute you start saying that the ice caps aren't melting and CO2 is life, they look at you like you just called them a racial slur and tell you you're wrong. And all you can do, and I've had that happen where I've had people look at me and tell me I need to get help, that I need to get over my denierism or whatever it is. And all you can do is just kind of grin and just shrug it off. And, you know, I think the funny part is you hear about certain people who talk about tolerance, and that is the most important thing when it comes to this topic is the tolerance. You're right. It's not going to take one conversation. It may take several times of explaining certain things to a person. And the one thing that we have to have is patience and tolerance with these people. We can't lose our patience with them, because the minute we fly off on the handle, it becomes less believable.
Well, I agree with that. Of course, you know that the problem was they were actually staring at your tinfoil hat, don't you?
Yeah, they're looking for it. Yes.
Someone in the chat, let's see, Sam said he gave his dad a copy of Upheaval.
Good deal.
John L. Casey. He's starting to believe, he thinks, and his kid still thinks he's a little woo. But he has hope that they'll come around. John Casey, his book really does break a lot of this down. He covers the historical aspect of it. He covers a lot of the history. And then he goes into the earthquake portion of it, which is very interesting.
I recommended that book today on the podcast that we did for that TCK for Eric over there, and he asked a lot of questions about volcanoes and earthquakes. And again, what a perfect example. And especially, I know the first 90 pages or so, there are a lot of things that John talks about that's happened already when he says it was going to happen. So definitely that is a book that should be recommended to everyone who would even want to start to begin to understand. But not everybody has time to read a book either. And that's the other challenge, is if someone's not interested or doesn't have the energy or even the desire or the will to even look into it, is it fair to say that that person's a lost cause and give up, or do you just keep trying to chip away time after time?
I think you have to chip away at them very slowly. And the real thing is not to try to convince them of anything. What you need to do is to spark some interest in them to get them to start looking for themselves. And I will guarantee you that once that they get that spark and start looking, they're going to come back with more questions than you can ever answer.
I think, and Randy Bolden in the chat, Tony Heller has helped me to realize that these cycles are recorded, and it's helpful to be reminded of that. And Tony Heller is a perfect example. He doesn't get excited. He doesn't get loud or offended or anything like that. He simply just states the facts. And I would say that he is definitely the poster child of helping people understand and calmly understand, because Tony has a great way of just presenting the facts, and not, again, like us, we don't try to sensationalize or exaggerate it, because what's happening is sensational enough. So yeah, good point, Randy. I agree. People like Tony, Richard, just talking to you on the phone, you seem like a laid back, nonchalant guy. So I could see hearing this kind of information from a guy like you would be helpful as well. But again, like I said in the podcast earlier today, what do you do to prep? And the biggest thing you can do for yourself for GSM prep is knowledge. Learn as much as you can now while the information is still available to us at the fingertips. And also, having books like Upheaval, and a book that I got for Christmas this year is basically, a 101 book on bushcraft. And I'd never heard of the term until I got the book. And I'm so thankful for this book. I mean, this book could save my life someday.
Books are excellent resources, which are basically no longer used. I read a lot of British military manuals from the 1800s, and the people were actually quite smart then. So
yeah,
they were just as smart as we are, and in some ways smarter, at least on a knowledge level. I think one of the major problems is nobody is actually taught any kind of history nowadays. Even 20 plus years ago, when my kids were going to school, their history was pretty pathetic compared to the history books that my mother had of the early 1900s. So, that's another battle to overcome.
I think Jesse just mentioned an excellent talking point here in the chat, telling anyone or a coworker that if you hear the term VEI7 about an eruption, go out and buy all the food you can. And yeah, I think that's the key. You have to use certain terms like that to give you, like, look, this is a signal. When you hear this term, that signal means things are about to change and change drastically. So, Jesse, I like the terminology there, and I like the approach, just because, unfortunately, with people who don't understand the science of this side of it, you have to communicate to them one thing they do know, and that's gloom and doom and fear, because they're already being told that man is destroying the climate. So that's a very good way to kind of help people identify, because there's so many people that speculate how bad it's going to get, but actually giving them an event to look for, like, hey, by the way, if you hear about a VEI7, you really want to think about getting all the food that you can, especially something that you can keep that has a long shelf life, and get as much prepper supply, because, go ahead and Google it now while you can, because you'll read all about what happens during a VEI7. And that's also what John Casey talked about in his book Upheaval. He actually is predicting a VEI7 or higher between now and 2037, which that's going to be right in the heart of this grand solar minimum. So again, his math and his work is also lining up with the timetable of what this cycle could bring us at that time. So, but Richard, is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap it up for the night?
No, I'll get off and let you all have peace and quiet.
Well, Richard, we appreciate your call as always. Hopefully we hear from you next week. We'll do this again next Friday. But again, thanks for calling. We definitely missed you.
Okay, nice to talk to you.
All right,
Bye.
take care, buddy. All right, well, I tell you what, we haven't had a call-in show for quite some time, and it was nice to get back on it tonight, talking to some old friends. Mari, I don't know about you, but definitely am looking forward to another show next Friday. What do you think we should talk about next week? I mean, I think we had some good talks about how to talk to your friends and family about certain topics to approach them about this climate change and what's really causing it. Lots of good points. People can share this video and maybe get something out of it. So what do you think next week?
Maybe we should ask our members. I want our members to tell us what you want to talk about. Let's get some more people calling in. We got some new members. Don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
Even if it's just you want to tell us how you got exposed to the topic and what worked for you when you got turned on to this topic. What was it that made you have that aha moment and say, yeah, this is it? Or if you want to share, something prepping or gardening or
you
whatever.
know what my aha moment was?
What?
John Casey.
John Casey.
When I started watching his videos and really started reading upheaval for myself, that was the real aha moment.
I'm so stubborn. I was a very hard to convince person coming from a debunking standpoint.
Yeah.
And my aha moment was after scientific paper after scientific paper after scientific paper after scientific paper.
Sure.
Reading and reading. And just having that utter fascination that all these papers with all these different timelines that are sort of lining up using different scientific theories. You have the proof in the tree rings. You have the proof in the ice cores, the carbon-14. There's so many different scientific studies that correlate with these cycles. It's absolutely fascinating. Yeah. If you are patient enough to first learn the terminology and then dive in and take your time and understand when you read a scientific paper, it's not like reading a book. You have to read it again and read it again and look up some more stuff and read it again and read it again. It is laborious. And
laborious. And that's really, a Ron Burgundy. Laborious. I'm Ron Burgundy. Laborious. Laborious. Sorry. Whenever you use that word, I want to just want to turn into Jacob Bulch. Hello, everyone. I'm Jacob Bulch, and my laborious labor report for tonight's grand solar minimum.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Anyway,
that's my husband to be, Jacob.
Well, again, I think we had a pretty good show. We got a couple minutes left before we wrap it up for the night. But so next week, maybe we should talk about...
we're leaving it up to the members to comment, and we're going to, whoever...
Let's make a decision by Wednesday, folks, okay?
Should I do a poll?
Maybe a poll, or leave in the comments of this show. And also, maybe Monday, I'll remind everyone after the Monday night show to leave comments about what you want the topic to be on Friday night, next Friday night's call-in show as well. So again, we will be on the same bat channel, same bat time next Friday night. I'm thinking I should be doing a report tomorrow. Yeah, probably, because we got Winter Storm Jacob, so I will.
Jake delivers the report on Jacob.
Let's do a special Saturday morning show tomorrow to make sure we get everyone aware of what the storm is doing. I know it's going to be impacting us tomorrow early.
I could probably do a live stream chat for everyone to chat amongst themselves.
We could do that as well.
Brilliant videos.
Still want to give them an update because this storm will really be getting going in the morning in most parts of Pennsylvania to be the heaviest, and then we'll start seeing the weather go downhill sometime late morning on Saturday. So just to give a quick update, and then actually keep the live chat up. Maybe we could all talk about how much precipitation, how much snow we're getting. Are we seeing ice? power outages. So yeah, good idea. We'll call it the Winter Storm Jacob chat in honor of my birthday coming up.
There you go.
So there we go. All right, we will cover Jacob for sure. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you for tuning in.
Easy for you to
and
say.
I will see you guys tomorrow morning for another Grand Solar Minimum News update. Until then, guys, have a great night.
Talk soon.
And we will talk soon.
I wanted to say at the same
Don't
time.
be jealous that you don't have a closing sign.
I do.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.